Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. Today I have a review for you guys on book 5 in the Wheel of Time, which is called The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. Now this is going to be a non-spoiler review, so if you have not read this book, you're absolutely safe to watch this review. However, in order to talk about this book, I am going to have to do things like mention characters that are in the book, so you know that they are not killed off in previous books, for example. May have to mention certain plot points or surprises or developments from the previous books. So my recommendation would be to read the first 4 books before you watch this video, or watch this video and not care about spoilers at all. So I have been reading a book a month of the Wheel of Time, and I finished this one a few days ago. However, this review has taken me a while to get down, sit down and record, because I've got a new baby at home. So my daughter Alice was born on the 29th, and while she is in a bit of a honeymoon phase at the moment, where she's not actually sleeping that badly and is mostly just kind of sleeping, pooping and eating, I haven't really had the time to settle down and make a video. So I'm hoping to make a few videos and kind of get back on track this week. But that's not what you guys are here for. Let's talk about The Fires of Heaven. So Fires of Heaven is a is the 5th book in the Wheel of Time, and we are getting to the point now where I feel like you could have, I think Jordan originally thought that the Wheel of Time might have been a trilogy, and then he expanded it to 6 books, I think. So you can kind of see where we are in The Fires of Heaven could be that penultimate book, that penultimate story. And I think that if Jordan had done that and he had ended it here, it still would have been excellent. But there's a few things about this book that I wanted to kind of run through with you guys. So the first thing we'll do is we'll talk characters, then we'll talk kind of plot and story developments, and then we'll come down to kind of a rating and what I thought of the book overall, and things like the ending, for example. Still all spoiler free. So I think The Fires of Heaven, many of the books of the Wheel of Time feel like they have a main POV or a main character. So for example, the previous book, which was called The Shadow Rising, which is many people's favourite, had really did feel like Perrin's book. So Perrin was a huge focus of the book, and one of the weird things about Fires of Heaven is that Perrin is not in this book. He's referenced a handful of times, and the story developments that happened in The Shadow Rising, the previous book, are referenced in The Fires of Heaven. Sorry, the names kind of, I want to say the names all kind of blend together, because they kind of do. Fires of Heaven, I don't really know what that means to this book. I've read the book now, and I still don't really know what Fires of Heaven means. It's in a song or poem as part during the book, but I don't feel like it was especially relevant. The previous books were all quite well named, I feel like. So Eye of the World obviously is the first book, and that's also, they spend the whole book going to the Eye of the World. This should be really talked about later on. Anyway, so Perrin's barely in this book. Well, Perrin is not actually on page in this book. He's referenced a couple of times by Rand and Matt and other Emmons Fielders, but and also Fail's and her family, and kind of what's going on with her family in Saldea. They are referenced, but not actively discussed. Actively discussed is the wrong term, not actively on the page. They aren't taking part in the book, if that makes sense, which is a really interesting development, to go from Perrin being 30% of the book last time to being 0% of the book. Because if you look at The Great Hunt to the Dragon Reborn, where this happened before, where Rand is not in The Dragon Reborn really, he has I think he has one POV chapter at the beginning, and then he has a half a page every 6 to 10 chapters throughout the book. And I think that worked better for me than the lack of Perrin in this book. If I had to think of like a reason why Jordan has done it, it almost feels like he wrote the book with Perrin in, and the publisher was like, we can't sell two 1100 page books in a row in the same series, you've got to cut something out. And so it feels like maybe he cut Perrin's storyline, because Perrin in the previous book and in this one is not in the same location as any of the other characters. That does mean that we miss out on Loyal, who is with Perrin, and we miss out on Fael, and we miss out on the rest of the Emmonsfield cast, which I really enjoy. So a very, very slight minor detract from that, but overall the book was very good. Now, as I was saying, this really feels like Rand's book, and it feels like Rand shares this book with Nynaeve, whereas the previous one was almost like Perrin and Elaine with two of the main POVs last time round, whereas this time round it feels like it's way more Rand and Nynaeve. And Rand is kind of in... Rand has accepted that he's the Dragon Reborn a couple of books ago now, and he is now using the power that comes from the title of being the Dragon Reborn, and also that he's got from his power to channel and being the most powerful channeler in the world, essentially. So he has kind of taken that top spot, as it were, and he's now leading an army of Aiel. So he went to the Aiel Waste and was like, hey, Aiel, I'm the Dragon Reborn. And basically the Aiel have been, their whole civilization has been based around waiting for the dragon to be reborn so that they can follow him as his army. And the whole point around that is that basically there's like a prophecy in for the Aiel, which is that they will be the people of the dragon and they will serve him, but he will destroy their society. And Rand has kind of started down that road, in that he is trying to, he doesn't want the Aiel to die. He needs them to help fight the Dark One, to fight the eventual, Dark Lord that is trying to destroy the world and kill everyone and take over. But maybe he's not actually trying to kill everyone, actually. Yeah, I think he might just be trying to take over the world, like Doctor Doom style. Anyway, so Rand is... he's using the Aiel, and one of the things that I really like about Rand, and the way that Jordan writes him, is that he is very clearly aware that he's using people, that he's taking what he wants from people and not necessarily giving them anything. We also get to see a little bit of another facet of this, like fanaticism around the dragon with the prophet character that has been referenced for several books now, who I absolutely guessed who it was going to be. And when they were revealed, I was like, brilliant. We are hashtag hunting for Hurin. He's not in this book again. So we spend, I've said this many times, we spend like a third of the Great Hunt with Hurin, right? And he's even in the beginning of the Dragon Reborn, and then we have never seen him again. And we've seen so many minor characters multiple times. We've seen Bael Domon like 8 times, but we've spent a whole book with Hurin and he's never come back. Maybe he's just realised that he's probably better off outside of the main circle of this cast, because it does seem like that. So yeah, Rand, I think Rand's biggest revelation here is the kind of like, he's kind of like an unwilling participant in the prophecies of the dragon, but he knows he has to. And then there's also that he's using the Aiel and he doesn't want to, but he's just like, well, it's either I do this thing or the world as we know it ends. And one of the interesting things as well that I liked about this was that Jordan's not afraid to shy away from the consequences of Rand's actions. So, like, we see the complete turmoil and the collapse of the Kyrian society, we see the kind of blowback from Couladin in The Shadow Rising and his kind of separatist band of Aiel going their own way and kind of trying to invade the wetlands. Yeah, there's so much interesting stuff in this book. I really liked that, the kind of the opening of the book. So when we look at the opening of The Shadow Rising and the opening of Fires of Heaven, they're kind of similar in that they're all like, Rand is now in charge of a new place. And so in the previous one, he's in charge of the of Tyr, of the Tyran kind of country, I guess. And then in this one, he is in the Aiel Waste, and in like the Aiel capital almost, for want of a better turn of phrase. So he's got kind of that going on. He's kind of got all this responsibility thrust on him. And it's very interesting as well, because in my mind I was like, oh, each book is like takes place over several months, and it's been like a few years since they left Emond's Field. But actually it's been like, in this book, Egwene and Rand both reference that it's been like 18 months and that Rand is like 20. So he's got all this responsibility, and not just the responsibility, but he also has the pressure of the prophecies of the dragon and the Carathon cycle all hanging over him. And I think it makes for a fascinating, really interesting character that I think Jordan is absolutely nailing all the way through. I will say that I do not love the polygamist aspect of Rand's whole deal. I know that this is ostensibly based on Robert Jordan's own love life in college, but it feels to me, reading the book, it almost feels like Elaine and Rand are like kind of the crew match, especially because like she's advising him on statesmanship and politics and ruling, and he's like, you know, the strong right arm for her throne, and a lot of the book revolves around their relationship, even if it's kind of subtext rather than out and out spoken. Like the main climax of the book comes from Rand wanting to do right by Elaine, essentially. Speaking of Elaine, so she is in this book. We've got, I think that it was in the last book that she came out and said this, but she's come out and said that she thinks she can create magic items using the One Power, which is a big thing. No one has been able to do it for centuries. It's one of those abilities that's lost to the Dark Ages, from before the breaking of the world. So there's that going on, and she's been studying the Adam, whatever it's called, the like collar and cuff chain thing from the Sean Chan, and she thinks she can make one, which is really interesting. We've also and she's kind of there's a little storyline at the beginning of this book that I was a bit like, Elaine, really? Like, I'm not sure why Jordan wrote that specific storyline, but once she kind of gets over that, I massively enjoyed her story. I mean, she is trying to kind of pull away from Nynaeve and from a couple of the other characters, and she's kind of got this, you know, strong duty and like very interesting character. Elaine, I think I said this in I've recorded a video before the baby was born, actually. Just haven't had time to edit it. So I've recorded a video that was how I feel about the Wheel of Time when I'm 4 and a bit books in, because I had like 100 pages left of Fires of Heaven. So I was like, I feel like I can say, I can have a kind of an update on how I feel. And yeah, I said that Elaine had emerged as one of my favorite characters, one of the strongest. I love Matt a lot, but Matt is basically like the protagonist of The Dragon Reborn, and then is barely in the next 2 books. So he has a bit more screen time in the Fires of Heaven, I really enjoyed what he did. So him and his his newfound kind of military skill and knowledge, which is an interesting kind of string to his bow that I really enjoyed. We've then got so we shift on to I mean, if we're talking about Matt, let's talk about Matt. So like Matt is again, I feel like Matt gets short shrift in this book. Every chapter he has is really interesting, and he has a very interesting plot line in this book, kind of the romantic plot line that I really liked, and I would like to I'm looking forward to seeing him in a romantic relationship, because we know that he's destined to marry the daughter of the Nine Moons, which, unless I'm going mad, is the Seanchan Empress's daughter, or the Seanchan Empress. So there's something that's going on, obviously, with Matt and the Seanchan that will go on with them. So that's exciting. I'll be interested to see how many of the prophecies and storylines wrap up in the next book, if Jordan had originally thought about it being a 6-book series. So moving on again to Egwene and Nynaeve. So let's start with Nynaeve, because she is the main kind of the lead character in this book. Well, not the lead character, but one of the leads. So Nynaeve in this book was, I feel like Jordan kind of this is like my only criticism of this book, which is that it feels like Jordan is trying to give us some character growth for Nynaeve, which I didn't really enjoy or think was that well done. It feels like she's been kind of taken a step back in this book, from being a bit more like self-aware and what have you in previous books. And now, I mean, this is especially in her own POVs, she is very much like, well, I do this because of this, and I do this because of this, and like reasoning it all out to herself. And she's, I don't know, I feel like I really enjoyed Nynaeve as a character in the previous books, and then in this one I was like, oh, well, certain aspect of her character I was a bit like, this is just kind of annoying. Like, it's not somebody that I would imagine I would want to be friends with in real life. Whereas in the previous books, I felt like she was like forthright, and she was, you know, used to being in charge, for example. But now it feels like she's just kind of a bit of a mess. And that's fine. Like, people can go through this sort of stuff. But it doesn't, I don't know if I feel like I was aware of her making kind of like changes or something happening to her to trigger this sort of thing. So it's a weird complaint, but I feel like the Nynaeve stuff is not particularly well done. I also think that it kind of comes across also as part of her chapters with the menagerie were also the least exciting and interesting chapters in the books. And there was never a chapter that was like on board of this sort of thing, but I was like, all these other characters are doing these really interesting things, and Nynaeve and Elaine, Tom and Julian are like just kind of doing this quite uninteresting thing over here. I thought that the section when they get to the first town near the beginning of the book, and they meet the like representative for the Aes Sedai was really good. I really enjoyed reading about the fallout from the kind of the coup at the tower in the previous book. That's been really good. The couple of POVs we have for Elida were great, and also kind of hearing about the changes that have been made to the office, and getting back in touch with Siuan and Leanne and Logain and Min. Loads of really good stuff. The blue encampment at Salidar, really interesting. So yeah, really good most of the Aes Sedai storylines in this book are fantastic. I really also enjoyed Egwene learning with the Wise Ones, though it definitely feels a bit like Egwene's like, oh, I'm actually good and like I know what's going on, I understand it, I'm advancing in skill, and they're like trying to hold her back, which like I guess you only really see from her POV. You don't see from the POV of the Wise Ones, who could be like, well, she'll die if she does this stupid stuff. So hard to tell whether that's just the way that Egwene sees it, if that makes sense, because the chapters are her POV. I feel like that's basically all the major characters, because like I said, Perrin isn't in this book. The big kind of plot development with Moraine was really good, and I think really well foreshadowed from the Shadow Rising to here. I will say now that I don't believe that is the thing that people think has happened in terms of her and Lanfear and what's going on there. But yeah, definitely really enjoyed that section of the book. Also, Asmodean is being great in this book, kind of this like sniveling, suspicious sort of character who reminds me of like Roger from Recess, but like he's like forced to hang out with all the cool characters. So yeah, I really would like to see where his character is going. I feel like there's definitely like something really there's some big possibilities there, where he becomes more important and more interesting, but then also there's some stuff that happens at the end of the book with him. So I'm looking forward to reading Lord of Chaos, which I'm literally looking at. It's on top of my book pile. I will not be reading it right away because I do have to finish a few books before I can get to it. And I think Matt and I, seeing as we're trying to read one book of Wheel of Time a month, but we're not in a rush. We're enjoying the series. We're chilling out. We don't want to rush into the slog, for example. But I'm sure I'll have finished. Maybe I will be doing the same thing I did this time, which is reading Wheel of Time at the end of the month again. But who knows? I do have a lot of SPFBO stuff to read, so don't know. Anyway, so I'm really looking forward to reading the next book in the series and finishing the series, continuing the series. I would still say The Wheel of Time is some of the best stuff I've read this year. I'm not sure whether I think this book is better than The Shadow Rising. I think The Shadow Rising is probably slightly better, but we're talking like 4.9 versus 4.8. Do you know what I mean? Like we're not talking the degrees of difference are mostly like, I thought some of Nynaeve's Menagerie chapters were not as interesting as the rest. And it's literally, those chapters are like, these are 4 out of 5s, not 5 out of 5s. So the quibble is extremely minor. And if I was rating this book, I definitely would be giving this a 5-star, like no shadow of a doubt. This is a 5-star book. And I am really excited to read the next one. Yeah, I don't think there's all too much to talk about here from here on out. Is there anything else? No. 2 of my theories were disproven in the last 2 books. So I had a theory in the past that Moraine was Morghez's older sister, and that she, or maybe not older sister, but she was the heir to the throne in Caemlyn, the Queen of Andor. Because we heard that the previous queen, or the previous candidate for queen had like abdicated or declined or something, and so the queen ended up being Morghez. All the Morghez stuff in this book was great, by the way. Really like her character. Really want to go back to her. So yeah, the Morghez stuff was good, and I thought that Moraine was going to be like, oh, she was actually the queen. She should have been the Queen of Andor, but that was proven wrong. We've been told explicitly that she's from Cairhien, and that's why she's so good at manipulating people, because she was born into the Deus Daemar, the game of Houses, I think is what they call it. Game of Houses, the Game of Thrones, whatever it is. My other theory was that Logain was going to teach Rand to channel, and that didn't happen because it was Asmodean. So that literally, I think pretty much those were my two theories, and both of them have now been proven wrong. I don't think I had any other big theories for what's going to happen in future. I know you guys like when people theory craft and try and, you know, work out what's going to happen. Very little in this book I feel like I could accurately forecast, although there's a lot of good stuff with, like, especially in the Shadow Rising, with the Aiel being the Tinkers, the Tuatha. I thought that was really interesting, and you could see so many allusions to that throughout the series that I felt like it made a lot of sense. And so I wasn't surprised. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. We haven't seen much more of the, like, sci-fi past in this book, which I was kind of interested to see, because obviously we have Asmodean on the team, and, like, he was alive then because he's one of the Aes Sedai from the breaking of the world, but we don't have all that much. We don't really have anything. I think he even says, like, he doesn't remember it very much. So interesting. I guess he's been shut away in Shire Ghoul with the other Forsaken for however many thousand years. Anyway, yeah, I think that's basically everything that I wanted to run through to discuss on this book. If you have read The Fires of Heaven and you would like to talk to me about it, please drop down into the comments below. As I said, I haven't started Lord of Chaos yet, and this is my first read through, so please no future spoilers in the comments. On top of that, if you would like to chat about any of the previous Wheel of Time books, you certainly can. Matt and I will be trying to do our Fires of Heaven spoiler cast at some point in the future. Not sure when, because now there is a baby at home. The evenings are a lot harder to schedule things than they previously were. But please do look out for it. We will be doing a spoiler cast. It's just going to be a matter of when. And finally, please also like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already, because it really helps the channel. And I love seeing that number go up. Thanks so much for watching today, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.